Lara Thompson sat by the window, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the quiet suburban street, painting the neighborhood in soft golden hues. The world seemed calm, almost perfect, but inside Laura's heart, there was a quiet restlessness she could not shake. Her home was orderly, peaceful, and filled with small reminders of love. Family photographs on the walls, a carefully tended garden in the backyard, and a kitchen that smelled faintly of vanilla and baked bread. Yet despite the comfort, Laura often felt a subtle ache she couldn't name. It wasn't sadness exactly, more like a longing, a quiet hope for something she didn't quite know how to reach. Laura's husband, Daniel, had always been steady and reliable. He worked hard, came home with a smile, and never failed to notice the little things that mattered. But even with Daniel's warmth, there was a space in Laura's life that only her son Ethan could fill. And that space felt more distant with each passing year. Ethan was 21 now, polite, attentive, and thoughtful, but he had a quietness about him that sometimes made Laura's heart ache. He moved through their home like a shadow at times, present but not fully revealed. He smiled when spoken to, laughed at jokes, and carried himself with gentle confidence, but he never shared the deeper parts of his heart. Laura had always sensed that behind those steady eyes, there was a world she had yet to enter. She remembered the little boy. He had been the one who would sit in the corner of the living room with a sketchpad and crayons, drawing worlds no one else could see. Back then, she thought it was a phase, a fleeting hobby. But now, as a young man, Ethan still carried that quiet creativity, hidden beneath layers of routine and caution. Lara often wondered what dreams he had tucked away, what hopes he had whispered to himself when the house was still, and what secret thoughts had never passed through the safety of their family circle. She tried to ask him gently, but his answers were always polite, brief, and carefully neutral. "Everything's fine," he would say. And she wanted to believe him, but a mother's intuition is rarely so easily satisfied. That evening, as golden light faded into twilight, Daniel suggested a family dinner. "Let's celebrate your graduation, Ethan," he said warmly, his eyes crinkling with pride. "It's been a big year, and I think we all deserve a quiet evening together." Lara felt a flutter of hope. Perhaps tonight, something might shift. Perhaps the invisible walls Ethan had built around himself could soften, just for a few hours. She began preparing dinner with a careful touch, humming softly to herself as she moved through the kitchen. The table was set with their best dishes, candles flickering gently in the dim light, and flowers from their garden arranged in a small vase at the center. As Ethan came home from work, Lara noticed the way he paused at the doorway, taking in the warm scent of the kitchen and the soft glow of candlelight. He smiled, a small, shy smile, and nodded in acknowledgement, but there was still a quiet distance in his gaze. The family sat together, the clinking of cutlery and soft hum of conversation filling the room. Lara felt the familiar mix of love and anxiety, her heart quietly wishing that tonight would be different. She stole glances at Ethan, noticing the way he occasionally tucked a strand of hair behind his ear, or traced a pattern on the tablecloth with his finger. Small, almost imperceptible gestures, yet they spoke volumes to her heart. There was an almost cinematic quality to the moment, a gentle suspense that lingered in the air. Lara felt as though the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something unspoken to surface. She could sense it in the way Ethan's eyes occasionally flicked toward the window, as if lost in thought, or the way he adjusted his chair, hesitating to fully settle into the moment. Lara didn't want to push too hard. She knew that whatever Ethan might share, if it ever came, it needed to come in his own time. So she focused on the warmth of the evening, the glow of the candles, and the soft sound of Daniel's voice as he told a funny story from work. And yet, under that calm surface, a current of curiosity and anticipation ran through her heart. Because somewhere beneath Ethan's quiet demeanor, Lavra sensed a truth, a hidden desire, a secret dream, a part of him that had been waiting, perhaps for years, to be revealed. And in that soft, golden light of the family dinner, she wondered, could tonight finally be the night that everything changed? The moment held a delicate suspense, a fragile hope wrapped in the ordinary rhythm of family life. Lavra didn't know what Ethan would say, or how he would say it, but she felt deep in her heart that something important was about to emerge. And with that thought lingering, the camera of her mind focused on Ethan, waiting, watching, silently wishing for the quiet courage to step forward and finally speak what had been hidden for so long. Ethan sat quietly at the table, his hands resting lightly on the edge of his plate. Lavra and Daniel were still smiling at him, waiting, encouraging, but he felt a strange pull in his mind, taking him back to days long gone. Days when he had first learned what it meant to feel a connection so deep, it left a gentle echo in his heart. He remembered middle school, the small library tucked behind the gym, where he spent countless afternoons. It was quiet there, with sunlight streaming through tall windows and dust motes dancing lazily in the air. That was where he had met Sophie, a classmate with an easy laugh, bright eyes, and a kindness that seemed to glow even in the most ordinary moments. At first, their friendship had been simple. They shared notes during class, exchanged books, and talked softly about everything from favorite stories to dreams that neither dared say aloud. Ethan had admired Sophie quietly, never speaking too loudly of his feelings. She had a way of noticing small details, the way he tapped his pencil when he was thinking, or the way he paused at the doorway before entering the library. It was in those unspoken moments that a bond had quietly formed, one neither of them fully named but both of them understood. He recalled the afternoons when they would sit on the old wooden benches outside, sketchbooks in hand. Ethan drew landscapes and buildings, while Sophie captured the people around them, the fleeting expressions of life in delicate pencil strokes. Sometimes they would exchange glances over the top of their notebooks, and their smiles were soft but meaningful. A single look could convey more than words ever could. There had been one afternoon that stayed with Ethan more than any other. The library was quiet, rain tapping softly against the windows, and he had shown Sophie a sketch of a small park near his home. "I like to imagine it full of life," he had whispered, almost afraid to speak too loudly. Sophie had looked at him with bright, understanding eyes. "It's beautiful," she had said. "You make it feel like it could breathe." That simple acknowledgement had stayed with him for years, a gentle warmth in a world that often felt quiet and uncertain. But as middle school ended and high school began, life had pulled them in different directions. Sophie moved to another town, and their letters became less frequent. Emails arrived sporadically, each one carrying pieces of their old bond, but nothing could replace the easy laughter of the afternoons they had shared. Ethan had watched as the seasons change, feeling the subtle ache of absence, learning how to treasure memories without being able to hold on to them. Even in high school, he often found himself sketching in the margins of his notebooks, capturing fleeting moments that reminded him of Sophie, the curve of a tree branch, the soft fall of sunlight across a quiet street, the smile of a classmate caught unaware. Those small things kept her alive in his thoughts, like a whisper of a song he could only hum softly to himself. Lavra had noticed his quiet ways, the way he sometimes lingered in the attic or by the window for hours. "He's remembering something," she thought, watching him with gentle curiosity. She never pried, knowing that memories, like paintings, needed space to breathe. It was during this period of reflection that Ethan began to understand a quiet truth about connection. that it did not always require words, and that sometimes the most meaningful bonds were those formed in subtle, shared moments. A glance, a soft laugh, a patient listening, these were the things that could shape a heart, just as powerfully as spoken promises. As he sat at the family dinner now, Ethan could feel the echo of those days lingering in his chest. The warmth of a memory, the ache of distance, and the gentle realization that some feelings had never faded. They had only been waiting for the right moment to resurface. He looked at his parents across the table, and for a fleeting second, he imagined telling them about Sophie, about the small, beautiful moments that had quietly shaped who he was today. But he held back. Tonight was not about the past, it was about the present. And yet the memories were alive, threading softly through his mind like a familiar melody. They reminded him that connection mattered, that love was not always loud or dramatic, and that sometimes the most powerful emotions were those quietly carried for years. He glanced at the flickering candle in the center of the table, and in that gentle glow, Ethan felt a fragile courage forming. The past had shaped him, yes, but it had also prepared him for this moment, this one evening where silence could be broken, where dreams could be spoken aloud, and where the quiet hope he had carried for years might finally be shared with the people who mattered most. The following morning, the sun poured gently through the kitchen window, warming the Thompson home with a quiet golden light. Ethan sat at the small breakfast table, staring absent-mindedly at the steam rising from his coffee. His mind was still lingering on the memories of Sophie, the afternoons in the library, the sketches, the laughter that had seemed to float effortlessly in the air. He had not spoken her name aloud in years, yet somehow the memory felt closer today, almost as if the past had quietly followed him into the present. Laura was bustling around the kitchen, humming softly, while Daniel read the newspaper across the table. The house felt alive, yet calm, a contrast to the inner tug-of-war Ethan felt. He wasn't expecting anything extraordinary today, yet life, it seemed, had a small twist waiting for him. Later that morning, while running a few errands in the town center, Ethan paused in front of a small art supply store. His eyes caught the familiar shade of a sketchbook sitting in the window display, and for a brief moment, the world outside faded. Then, he heard a gentle voice behind him. "Ethan?" He turned slowly, and there she was, Sophie, almost as he remembered, but older now, carrying the same warmth in her eyes and the same quiet confidence in her posture. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. The air between them was filled with a soft mixture of surprise, recognition, and an unspoken understanding of shared history. "Sophie," Ethan finally managed, his voice steady but soft, as though speaking her name aloud made the years of distance shrink into a single, fragile moment. She smiled, a small, knowing smile. "It's been a long time," she said, her voice carrying the same gentle calm he remembered from the library. "I didn't expect to see anyone I knew here." They moved slowly into the store, side by side, yet neither rushed the conversation. Words were unnecessary at first. A glance at the shelves, a shared chuckle at a familiar brand of pencils, and the subtle tilt of heads as they nodded toward a painting kit. They spoke volumes without a single sentence. Ethan noticed the little details, the ones he had loved about her long ago, the way her eyes crinkled slightly when she smiled, the small gestures that revealed kindness and attentiveness. It was like meeting an old friend who had carried a part of him with her all these years. They began to talk, cautiously at first, about simple things: art, school, mutual acquaintances. But as the conversation unfolded, the memories returned gently, uninvited but welcome. Ethan mentioned a sketch he had tried to finish last week, and Sophie recalled a similar exercise they had done together in the library. They laughed quietly at how seriously they had taken such small tasks back then, and in that shared laughter, the walls that distance had built around them softened. Ethan found himself noticing a warmth he hadn't expected, an easy, natural comfort that reminded him of why he had always cherished her presence. And Sophie, too, seemed to sense the quiet admiration that had lingered in the background all those years ago. It was not about romance or attraction, but about human connection, the type that leaves gentle impressions, that shapes who we are without ever demanding attention. At one point, a breeze drifted in through the open door, carrying the faint scent of spring blooms from outside. Ethan and Sophie paused, letting the moment linger. Neither spoke, yet their eyes met and held for just long enough to convey the comfort, nostalgia, and unspoken care that had endured despite years apart. I never really forgot those afternoons in the library, Ethan admitted quietly, almost to himself. They meant more than I could have said back then. Sophie's smile softened, and she nodded. I remember them too. I think that's why art has always felt like such a safe place for me. It's where I could hold on to those moments. The conversation continued, flowing naturally like a quiet stream. They shared stories of small successes, struggles and dreams that had carried them forward. The longer they spoke, the more Ethan realized that the years of separation hadn't diminished the bond. They had merely transformed it into something deeper, something patient and enduring. As the encounter drew to a close, Ethan felt a gentle clarity he hadn't expected. Life had a way of circling back, of offering second chances, not through grand gestures, but through small, tender reunions that reminded us of what truly matters. He knew this meeting wouldn't erase the past, nor would it define the future entirely, but it had reminded him of the quiet courage to speak, to share, and to value the connections that shape a life. Ethan held the small envelope in his hands, its edges worn from years of careful storage. He hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of both curiosity and emotion. The morning sunlight fell gently through the shop window, casting a soft glow over the paper. Slowly he opened it. Inside was a letter from Sophie, written years ago. Her handwriting was familiar, slightly slanted, and full of careful thought. She had never sent it, but had kept it tucked away, just as he had hidden his sketches and thoughts over the years. The words were simple, yet they carried a depth that made Ethan's chest tighten. Ethan, I've always admired your patience, your creativity, and the quiet kindness that others often overlook. I hope, wherever life takes you, you remember the small moments that mattered, the afternoons in the library, the sketches, the shared laughter. You have a gift, and the world deserves to see it. For a long moment, Ethan simply stared at the letter. The years of silence, the careful keeping of dreams and memories, suddenly felt lighter. He realized that truth, even when unspoken, had a way of finding its moment. And here it was, gently, patiently, arriving when it was needed most. He looked up at Sophie. She was watching him with quiet patience, a soft understanding in her eyes. I didn't know you'd kept this, Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. I never imagined you'd write to me. Sophie shook her head, a gentle smile touching her lips. I didn't want to impose, but I kept it because I hoped someday we'd meet again. And I think maybe that day is today. Ethan's emotions swirled, a mixture of nostalgia, gratitude, and an overwhelming sense of connection. I've carried so much of this with me, he admitted. All these memories, and all the things I wanted to say but didn't. Sophie nodded. I understand. And I think sometimes keeping things safe until the right moment is its own kind of courage. They stood quietly for a few seconds, letting the words settle, letting the past and present coexist in a shared, gentle silence. There was no rush, no need for dramatic gestures, just a simple recognition of truth, and the warmth of a bond that had endured years apart. Ethan carefully folded the letter and tucked it into his pocket. "I want you to know something," he said softly. "All those afternoons, the sketches, the laughter, it shaped me. It reminded me that kindness and creativity matter, and that even small connections can leave a mark on a life." Sophie's eyes glimmered. "I feel the same way. And I think that's why it's so special to see you now, not just as a memory, but as the person you've become." There was a gentle pause. Outside, a soft breeze rustled the leaves, carrying the scent of blooming flowers into the shop. In that quiet moment, Ethan understood something important. Life was not only about the paths we take, but also about the moments we pause to notice, the people who shape us, and the courage it takes to finally speak a truth long held. "I'm glad we met today," Ethan said, a warm smile breaking across his face. "It feels right." Sophie returned the smile, her voice soft but steady. "Me too. Sometimes life brings the right people back at the right time. Even if it takes years." They lingered a little longer, sharing stories and reflections, the conversation flowing easily now that the past had been acknowledged. There was no pressure to define the future, only the quiet understanding that some bonds, nurtured over time, were meant to endure. Finally, Sophie glanced at her watch. "I should head back," she said, though her expression was gentle, not rushed. "But I hope this isn't the last time we see each other." Ethan nodded. "It won't be. I promise." He watched as she left, feeling a serene sense of closure and hope at once. The letter, the memories, and this encounter had all merged into a single, meaningful moment, a reminder that truth, kindness, and patience could carry someone through even years of silence. Returning home, Ethan felt lighter, as if a quiet burden had lifted. He walked into the living room, where Laura and Daniel were waiting with smiles. The warmth of family embraced him, and for the first time in a long while, he felt completely present. He sat down beside them and shared a few of his thoughts, carefully, gently. Not everything needed to be explained, yet he allowed his parents a glimpse into his world, the memories he cherished, the lessons he had learned, and the hope he carried for the future. Laura reached out and squeezed his hand, a soft reassurance that words alone could not convey. And in that simple act, Ethan realized the depth of human connection, the quiet power of understanding, the strength of patience, and the beauty of a heart allowed to grow and speak when the time is right. Closing reflection. Life often asks us to wait, to carry our dreams quietly, and to honor the people and moments that shape us. When truth finally emerges, when kindness and patience meet courage, it creates a space where hearts can reconnect, memories can breathe, and hope can flourish. Love, in its purest form, is often gentle, patient, and enduring, and it is in those moments of quiet honesty that we truly feel its power. The Thompson home glowed with a gentle warmth that evening. Ethan, Laura, and Daniel shared smiles, laughter, and the comforting presence of family. And outside, the sun set softly, promising tomorrow's light and the quiet hope that life, at its best, always gives the heart a chance to speak.